Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Katya and Eric, for that lovely special music. Right now, we will begin by having a silent word of prayer. So if you can. Sorry, I forgot I was being translated. 1 second. All right, if we can begin with the silent word of prayer. Amen. So on Friday, when I was listening to Elder Tess, I was very surprised to hear the question that she asked. And that is because it was the same question I was going to ask you. And that question was, what does it mean to pay homage to the papacy? So I don't know how many of you went back and looked at that study. But we know that repetition deepens the impression. And so we're going to start off this study by answering that question. So what does it look like to pay homage to the papacy? Before answering this question, I would like to tell you my main focus, though. Which will be looking at the history of the Nativists in the 1800s. By now, I'm sure we've all read the document written by Jared Goldstein. On how the Constitution became Christian. I'm not sure about everyone else, but when I read this document, I was very surprised. I was surprised to learn that SDAs were not the only threat to Protestants. And actually shocked to see that Catholics were also a threat. The reason I decided to look into this history of the Nativists is because I think it proves and adds evidence to the fact that Catholics were indeed a threat. And this history is a horrific picture of what it looks like when Protestant America feels threatened. So in reviewing this history, we're going to see horrific events. And that occurred because of the perceived threat of a group of people. So hopefully by the end of my presentations, you'll see clearly that indeed Protestants felt threatened by the Catholics. Specifically the Irish Catholics. So there's a quote that we find in volume 5 of the testimonies. It's on page 451. I'm just going to share my screen if I can. Is it working? 1 second. So, okay. So this is the quote. 1 second. I'm not sure why. Maybe I can't share the quote with you. So we'll just okay, maybe no. Okay. If it doesn't work, that's okay. I just know for myself that I'm a visual learner. And I like to read, not just listen. So I don't know if you're able to see the quote or not.
Tiffany's just showing us loading. Is that right?
Okay, yeah. It's loading here too. Okay, here we go. So I just want to read the bolded part here in the middle. It says, when Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power. And then down below it says, our country shall repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government. So the document on how the Constitution became Christian, it showed us that it doesn't look like what we might have thought it would look like. Protestants don't have some secret alliance with the papacy. You know how we have all these different conspiracies where there's secret symbols and handshakes and all of these different things. So when reading the document, you see that the Protestant Americans are actually at war, essentially, with the Catholics. Okay, so we're going to look first at, again, what I said before, that what it looks like for Protestant America to pay homage to the papacy. We'll also be answering how sorry, can you hear me now? How long was it out?
Just repeat your last sentence.
Okay, so there are 3 questions that we're going to look at today. The first one is, what would it look like for Protestant America to pay homage to the papacy? How does American history show us that Protestants and Catholics are at enmity with one another? And who are the nativists and how do they fit into this picture? And by answering these questions, I believe that God's people won't be taken off guard. We have been given light sent from heaven to gain the knowledge we need to avoid paying homage to the papacy in the future. So as we know, history is our safeguard. And a Bible verse that I love to think of is that there's nothing new under the sun. So we will begin by answering the first question. What does it mean to pay homage to the papacy? Okay, so we're going to look at a quote from Great Controversy. And you'll find it on page. It is the first paragraph. Is this the right one? Yes. Okay, so I'll begin to read. The lamb-like horns and the dragon voice of the symbol point to a striking contradiction between the professions and the practice of the nation thus represented. The speaking of the nation is the action of its legislative and judicial authorities. By such action, it will give the lie to those liberal and peaceful principles which it has put forth as the foundation of its policy. As we learned from previous studies, what the US professes and what it does is completely different. So it will always profess that it is a free nation and that it upholds peaceful principles. But we know this is a lie. We also learn from inspiration that our attention needs to be on the legislative and judicial branches of government. And not on the power in the executive branch, which is entrusted to the president. Let's continue reading. Not sure. 1 second.
Tiffany, we can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. Okay. We'll start reading. The prediction that it will speak as a dragon and exercise all the power of the first beast plainly foretells a development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution that was manifested by the nations represented by the dragon and the leopard-like beast. And the statement that the beast with two horns causeth the earth and them that which dwell therein to worship the first beast indicates that the authority of this nation is to be exercised in enforcing some observance which shall be an act of homage to the papacy. So the end of this quote tells us that when the US enforces some observance, the observance in itself will be an act of homage to the papacy. So we're going to skip ahead to another paragraph. This is 446.1 of Great Controversy. So the special characteristics of the beast, and no, I don't want to start there. I'm going to start only by changing. It's in the middle of the paragraph. Only by changing God's law could the papacy exalt itself above God. Whoever should understandingly keep the law as thus changed would be giving supreme honor to that power by which the change was made. Such an act of obedience to papal laws would be a mark of allegiance to the Pope in the place of God. Okay, so as we can see here, the act of obedience to papal laws would be a mark of allegiance to the papacy. So what does it mean to pay homage to the papacy? Hopefully we can answer this question now. If the papacy has changed the law of God, and you start to observe that law that they changed, by observing that law, you will be honoring the power that changed the law. Therefore, you will be paying homage to the papacy when you observe their law. Okay, so we answered the first question. And we're now going to review briefly the document by Jared Goldstein. How the Constitution became Christian. Okay, there are 3 histories discussed in this document. Okay. Okay, so the first history (1863) to the 1900s. We'll just put 1950s here, but it's the late 1940s. And I believe it's 1979 till our time. Okay, throughout these 3 histories, Jared tells us that there's a perceived threat. And so there's a threat in each of these histories. So this is Protestant America, but certain movements within Protestant America. So, okay, we're going to read the introduction on page 263. And it tells us the reason why these movements within Protestantism why they started in the first place. So let's try this again. All right, so the movement was propelled by concerns over the increasing population and power of Catholics, Jews, Seventh-day Adventists, and religious freethinkers. Increasing religious diversity generated a variety of challenges to Protestant preeminence, including objections to Christian prayers and Bible readings in public schools, Sabbath observance laws, and religious oaths. Leaders of the Christian Amendment movement considered these challenges to be nothing less than a war on Christianity and therefore an attack on America itself. The nation's Christian identity could be saved, the movement argued, if only the Constitution could be made Christian. So the Christian Amendment movement felt threatened. They felt like there was a war on Christianity. And that meant an attack on America itself. And who did they feel threatened by? The Catholics, the Jews, Seventh-day Adventists, and freethinkers. So this is what was surprising to me, that Catholics were actually a threat to Protestants. So what is the relationship between Catholics, or between the papacy and Protestantism in this time period? So enmity. Many Adventists would have a hard time with this concept, because in this time period, you have 1888. And in 1888, what was happening? The Protestants wanted to pass the Sunday law. And so if you don't know or understand the history between the Protestants and the Catholics, it might be easy for you to believe that they had some secret alliance with the papacy. But as we'll see, that is simply not the case. We're going to look at another quote. This is not the one. Okay, in spite of themselves, Romanists declared that the observance of Sunday by the Protestants is an homage they pay in spite of themselves to the authority of the Catholic Church. The enforcement of Sunday keeping on the part of the Protestant churches is an enforcement of the worship of the papacy of the beast. Those who understand the claims of the fourth commandment choose to observe the false instead of the true Sabbath are thereby paying homage to that power by which alone it is commanded. But in the very act of enforcing a religious duty by secular power, the churches would themselves form an image to the beast. Hence, the enforcement of Sunday keeping in the United States would be an enforcement of the worship of the beast and his image. So here we can see that in spite of themselves, they were paying homage to the papacy. Even though the Protestants may have a disdain for the Catholics, that didn't change the fact. If they forced an observance of a Sunday law, they would have been paying homage to the papacy. In the history of the 1800s, is there a friendship between Catholics and Protestants? We will see that history tells us no. Okay, so now we're going to get into the main purpose of my study. How does history show us that Protestants and Catholics are at enmity? Who are the nativists and how do they fit into this story? We're going to be looking at the persecution of the Catholics, but more specifically, the Irish Catholics. And there is another document that's been written by Jared Goldstein. And it was shared in the media broadcast group. And it's entitled Unfit for the Constitution, Nativism and the Constitution from the Founding Fathers to Donald Trump. I found this document fascinating and it began my journey into figuring out who the know-nothings were. We're going to start by reading a few quotes from the introduction. Okay. Okay, this is the nativist idea. This article tells the story of an idea. It's an old idea, an ugly idea, and a discredited idea. It is a nativist idea, and the idea that the United States Constitution was made only for some people, while others should be excluded. While others should be excluded from entering the country out of suspicion that their race or religion make them likely to harbor hostility to the nation's constitutional principles. So who are the nativists? Nativists believe that they were the true Native Americans. This was despite the fact that they were immigrants themselves. So sometimes they would call themselves real Americans or 100% American or just plain old Americans. In response to the waves of immigration in the mid-19th century, nativists created political parties and tried to limit the rights of immigrants. All right, we're going to look at, it still is in the introduction of this document. So we're going to read this paragraph as well. Roosevelt expressed what has become the conventional understanding of American nationalism. That what unites the nation and what makes America America is a shared devotion to a common creed of liberty, equality, and democracy. A creed expressed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. In the conventional understanding, the American Creed consists of a universal set of principles that can be embraced by anyone without regard to race, religion, or ancestry. And as Roosevelt claimed, American national identity has always meant devotion to the American Creed and has never been about race or ancestry. As this article shows, however, for most of American history, the dominant view that has guided American policies has been the nativist belief that only people who share the nation's dominant ethnicity and religion are capable of constitutional devotion, while others must be excluded because of the dangers they are suspected to pose to the nation's fundamental values. An example of this is in the 1840s. The Know Nothings. So they're a nativist political party. And they opposed Irish immigration based on a belief that Catholicism was incompatible with the Constitution. So before we dive into the Know Nothings, we're going to review history that's prior to that time. So I'm going to draw a timeline. And it's just a timeline showing different events that occurred. And these events will show that Protestants did indeed feel threatened by the Catholics. Specifically, the Irish Catholics. My hope is that this history will indeed show us that there is no friendship between the Catholics and Protestant America. And these are just a few events that promote the nativist idea. Okay. I'm going to got there. Okay, hopefully. Okay, so this is the Dark Ages. And in Massachusetts, I can't really say that. There was a law passed in 1700. And it forbade the Catholics to, you can see that, it forbade the Catholics to reside in the colony. And the penalty for them was imprisonment and execution. So we'll just say that they were banned, I guess. Then we have 1798, which the Dark Ages have ended. And in 1831, you have St. Mary's Catholic Church burnt to the ground. So this church was in New York. And actually beginning in the 1830s, the city had experienced several outbreaks of riots and violence. And this was led by Nativists against the Catholics. So after this church was burned, they rebuilt it. And they actually set up a brick wall that protected it. There were frequent brawls and street riots between the Protestants and Catholics. And this led them to form a self-defense group in 1836. So this shows us how bad the situation was. In following years, Nativist mobs had advanced on St. Patrick's several times, but were turned back after receiving reports that armed Irish defenders were behind the walls. So the Irish were behind the walls protecting the cathedral. And so when mobs would try to attack, they would realize that, and then they would run away. Okay. Another event is in 1834. Okay, and this is regarding the Ursuline Covenant riots. So the Ursuline Convent riot, sorry. So this happened in Charlestown, near Boston. And this convent was also burnt to the ground, it was ruined. The night before, a Protestant mob sacked it and burned it to the ground. So the nuns that lived there and the students were forced to flee for their lives. The rioters were mostly poor Yankee laborers who feared and hated Irish Catholic immigrants. Even though some of Boston's wealthiest Protestants sent their daughters to this academy. Most Yankees harbored a deep prejudice against Catholics. Since they were constantly suspicious of popery. And because of this, they were eager to hear malicious rumors that began to spread about this convent. So there are various causes that led indirectly to its destruction. But among the most prominent were rumors. The rumor was that nuns were being confined against their will. So they actually had people that went to investigate this. And they interviewed a sister there, Sister Mary. And she informed them that she was at liberty to leave the institution anytime she chose. So they left perfectly satisfied in their own minds that the rumors were definitely erroneous and the reports were not true. But it was too late to notify the public of the results of the visit before the attack. So they wanted to inform the public that everything's okay. But it was too late. What I found fascinating when I was doing this study is that a lot of the events how do I say this? They did, some of them occurred because of lies, or definitely lies or rumors definitely made the situation worse. And we know for our time period, our test is equality, but the base of that test comes in which stream of information we choose. So if the information we're receiving is a conspiracy theory, we won't be on the right side of equality. And by believing some of these conspiracies or rumors, horrible things can take place. So I'm under the assumption that I speak until now is a break, correct? And then we meet again at 11. So I'm just gonna stop here and we'll pick up where we left off. So if we can just kneel in a word of prayer. Okay. God of heaven, I thank you so much for the opportunity to look into history. I thank you for sending us light from heaven, that we can understand, by understanding the past, we can understand the future. I pray for all of us, Lord, that we would have our eyes open to the truths that you're trying to teach us. May we understand them so that we can share them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, everyone. We will come back in 30 minutes. See you then.